On election night, Zohran Mamdani stood before a sea of cheering supporters, confetti falling, cameras flashing, and the sound of hundreds chanting his name. It was history in the making. New York's youngest, most progressive mayor, a son of immigrants, a politician who claimed to represent a new kind of leadership, bold, transparent, and powered by the people. Television anchors called it a changing of the guard. Pundits said it was proof that politics could still belong to ordinary citizens. And as Mamdani smiled from the podium, his campaign team basked in the glow of what looked like a clean, decisive victory. But while the cameras captured celebration, something else, something quieter, was already being recorded, not by reporters or photographers, but by spreadsheets, wire transfers, and digital footprints scattered across campaign finance records. Because while Mamdani's rise looked like a fairy tale, financial documents were telling a far more complicated story, a story of foreign donations, shadowy super PACs, and a network of money flowing through shell organizations and private donors, a network now under formal investigation. On the surface, it was a victory speech, but behind the lights and applause, it was the start of a paper trail, one that would soon raise uncomfortable questions about who really helped him win. This isn't just another election scandal, it's a test of how far modern politics can bend before it breaks. Because in the end, every great victory has two stories, the one we celebrate and the one we were never meant to see. Sometimes, the story that shines the brightest hides the darkest truth. To understand this controversy, we first have to understand the image that Zohran Mamdani built, the persona that made him one of the most talked about political figures in New York City. He wasn't just another politician, he was the people's candidate, a reformer, a young immigrant voice rising against the establishment, sharp, articulate, and unafraid to call out power where he saw it. His story resonated deeply. Born to working-class parents, educated in public schools, and active in local movements, Mamdani crafted a public identity rooted in empathy and activism. His campaign leaned heavily into that authenticity. The message was clear: he wasn't one of them, he was one of us. He promised fairness, accountability, and transparency. He spoke about rent justice, about the working poor, about immigrants struggling to survive in a city that often forgets them. He talked about breaking the grip of corporate landlords, cutting backroom deals out of politics, and putting the people back in power. And New Yorkers believed him. Rallies grew larger. His social media presence exploded. Interviews painted him as the face of a new political era, one where sincerity, not sponsorships, won votes. Major outlets rushed to celebrate him. Headlines praised him as a breath of fresh air, the future of New York politics, and proof that grassroots democracy still works. He became the symbol of something bigger, a movement against cynicism, a story that said integrity could still survive the system. To his supporters, Mamdani wasn't just a candidate, he was a cause. Every handshake, every rally, every viral clip reinforced the narrative. The people's mayor who couldn't be bought, who couldn't be corrupted. And when he finally won, it felt personal. For his base, it wasn't just his victory, it was theirs. A moment that proved the establishment could still be challenged and beaten. But here's the thing about perfect stories. They rarely stay perfect for long. Because behind every carefully crafted campaign lies a second narrative, one that doesn't fit the headlines or the photo ops. Behind the smiling press photos and the viral campaign moments, the paper trail was beginning to tell a much more complicated story. A story that would soon challenge everything the so-called people's mayor claimed to stand for. Every campaign leaves a trail of numbers, names, and transactions. And when journalists and watchdogs began digging into Zohran Mamdani's campaign filings, something unusual began to surface. At first glance, the donations looked normal. Small dollar contributions, grassroots support, local excitement. But tucked quietly between the names of New York residents were a few entries that raised red flags: foreign donors, people who, by law, cannot contribute to U.S. political campaigns. It started with a few $100s, then a few thousand. By the time auditors traced the pattern, nearly $9,000 in foreign-linked donations had been flagged and refunded. The campaign insisted it was an honest mistake, the result of clerical errors and technical oversights. But for investigators, the question wasn't what was caught. It was what wasn't. If they found $9,000 worth of illegal donations, how much more slipped through unnoticed? Because campaign finance isn't just about the money you see. It's about the money that never makes it onto the official books. And that's where things start to get murky. Several of those refunded donations came from accounts tied to overseas interests, individuals connected to business networks that had quietly expressed interest in New York's redevelopment and housing sectors Mamdani publicly promised to regulate. The overlap was concerning. Emails and documents reviewed by watchdog groups suggested that campaign staffers may have failed to properly vet donor sources, even after warnings from compliance officers. One internal note reportedly read, "Process the funds, we'll review later." Later never came. Now, on paper, $9,000 might not seem like much, a rounding error in the scale of New York politics. But when it comes to foreign influence, even one unchecked dollar can unravel an entire campaign's credibility. Because if the gatekeeping failed once, what else slipped through? If the financial filters were that weak, what other money, or influence, found its way in? This was no longer about bookkeeping errors. It was about a system that looked the other way, and a campaign that may have benefited from it. The story was no longer about foreign money being refunded. It was about whether those refunds were just the visible part of something much larger, something hidden beneath the surface. By this point, the foreign money questions were already stirring the waters. But what came next made those $9,000 donations look like pocket change. Investigators began noticing something strange. While Mamdani's official campaign operated on a modest budget, another force seemed to be working quietly in parallel, a force with money, lots of it. More than $1.8 million worth of ads, mailers, events, and independent outreach suddenly appeared in support of Mamdani's campaign. But here's the catch. None of it was officially linked to his team, at least not on paper. It was orchestrated by a super PAC, an independent political committee that, by law, can't coordinate directly with a candidate. These organizations can spend unlimited amounts of money as long as they operate independently. That's the key word, independently. But watchdogs noticed something off. The same marketing firms, the same ad vendors, even some of the same consultants working for Mamdani's official campaign were also being paid by this super PAC. Different names, same invoices, same messaging. And the result? A campaign that looked grassroots on the surface, but was being boosted by an invisible million-dollar machine underneath. When a complaint was filed to the State Ethics Board, it accused the campaign of crossing a dangerous line, of coordinating with a supposedly independent organization. If true, that would mean the $1.8 million wasn't just outside support. It was an illegal extension of Mamdani's own campaign. Emails reportedly shared between consultants hinted at overlapping strategies. Same target demographics, same scripts, even identical event schedules. One watchdog group described it bluntly. This wasn't support. This was a shadow campaign. And just like that, the narrative shifted again. From foreign money errors to something far bigger. A full-scale operation designed to amplify one candidate using money that was never meant to be under his control. It was no longer about donations. It was about influence. And influence that operates in the shadows rarely leaves clean fingerprints. When the headlines fade and the press conferences end, what's left are the questions no one wants to answer. Questions like, who really funded the rise of Zohran Mamdani, and what do they want in return? Because every dollar in politics comes with a price tag. And when that money moves through shell packs, offshore donors, and consulting firms with no clear trail, the question stops being about legality. It becomes about loyalty. Is the mayor truly the people's champion he promised to be? Or does he now owe silent debts to invisible hands that helped build his empire? The formal complaints have triggered investigations, but so far, no definitive answers. The official line from Mamdani's team? Everything was by the book. Yet, documents suggest otherwise. Overlapping payments, coordinated messaging, and a suspicious pattern of timing that doesn't happen by accident. And that's what makes this story so unsettling. Because even if no crime is proven, the doubt itself changes everything. The reformer mayor who ran on transparency now finds his own finances clouded in secrecy. For voters, it's not just about one man. It's about trust. If the candidate who promised to clean up the system is caught inside it, what hope is left for real reform? His legacy now hangs on what comes next. whether the truth emerges or stays buried beneath a mountain of campaign filings and silence. Because in politics, it's not always the money that destroys you, it's the questions you never answer. So now, we're left with a city divided between what we were told and what we're slowly discovering. Zohran Mamdani's story began as a promise, a movement built on hope, fairness, and transparency. But tonight, as the dust settles, we're left staring at a different picture, one marked by unanswered questions, secret donors, and the uneasy realization that even the brightest ideals can cast long shadows. Because this isn't just about one politician, it's about a system, one that rewards connections, conceals money trails, and buries accountability beneath layers of paperwork and PR. It's a story we've seen before, and one we'll likely see again, unless someone decides to start asking the hard questions. And that's where you come in. What do you think? Was this the brilliance of a well-oiled campaign machine, or something much darker, a manipulation of democracy itself? Does this expose a flaw in one man, or a flaw in the entire system we keep trusting to tell us the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice, your perspective, might be the one that keeps stories like this from disappearing into silence. And if you believe more people need to see what's really happening behind the curtain, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because sometimes, the biggest scandals don't explode. They unfold, one hidden truth at a time.